At the beginning of the film, a man identified as Dalton Russell is imprisoned in a small cell. He boasts that he has recently completed the perfect bank robbery, and the following scene shows how the robbery was carried out in New York. Masked robbers dressed in painters' coveralls arrive in a van outside a Manhattan Trust Bank branch. They start loading what appear to be painting supplies onto handcarts. Dalton, one of the painters, enters the bank and places two large, high-intensity flashlights on one of the small service tables in the lobby. He activates them and directs them toward two of the bank's security cameras, blinding them. Dalton then approaches a security guard from behind and points a gun at him. The other painters rush in with firearms and smoke bombs, subduing the bank customers. Meanwhile, Sergeant Collins, a passing NYPD patrol officer, notices smoke coming from under the bank doors. When he tries to open the doors, he discovers that they are locked and calls the police. Detective second-grade Keith Frazier is on the phone with his girlfriend Sylvia, who works as a desk officer at another station, at the police station. They're talking about a corruption investigation involving a shady drug dealer who set Frazier up to appear to have embezzled a large sum of drug deal money. The charge prevents him from being considered for promotion to detective first grade. The following day, Frazier and his partner Bill Mitchell are informed by their commanding officer, Captain Matthias Coughlin, that they have been assigned to work the hostage situation at the Manhattan Trust Bank. They rush to the bank after accepting the offer. During this time, the police arrive in force at the Manhattan Trust, including patrol officers, a mobile command center, and the Emergency Services Unit, ESU. The bank robbery is also communicated to the bank's founder and chairman, Arthur Case. In the next scene, Frazier arrives outside the bank and speaks with Sergeant Collins as they prepare to go to work. The robbers followed all of the hostages downstairs to the vault. A female robber separates the bank employees from the customers. Dalton informs everyone that they will be collecting everyone's cell phones and keys. He then has Stevie, the female robber, separate the male and female hostages and order them to undress. Dalton then hands out painters' suits with a few masks, and dark shades orders everyone to put them on right away. The hostages and robbers are virtually indistinguishable. Meanwhile, Frazier and Mitchell are introduced to ESU Captain John Darius. He announces that he and Mitchell will meet at the nearest diner to await a call from Darius. Once a briefing on the current situation has been prepared, inside the bank, one of the hostages is uncontrollably coughing and wheezing and grabbing him. Dalton pushes him outside and ushers him to the door. The police handcuff him and let him away because they can't tell if he's a robber or a hostage. At this point, the film switches between the main plot lines. It cuts to Frazier and Mitchell interviewing hostages after the robbery has ended. They're separating the perpetrators from the rest of the hostages. Dalton and his associates are currently walking past the vault, the safe deposit boxes, and into a storage room where various stationery and other office equipment are stored at another office. In Manhattan, a high-powered fixer named Madeline White is interviewing Osama bin Laden's nephew, who is looking to buy property in the city. White's assistant interrupts the interview by telling her that Arthur Case is on the phone. White answers the phone and, knowing White's profession, explains that he has a minor problem that requires special skills and complete discretion. She assures him that she is more than capable of handling the situation. The plot shifts to the aftermath of the robbery. Frazier and Mitchell question a young man who tells them that the perps called each other Steven, Steve, Steve-O, and Stevie. White and the female perp are walking along the riverfront, discussing what the case requires. He has valuable family heirlooms inside his Manhattan Bank safety deposit box, which is being held up inside a mobile command center just outside the bank. The detectives discovered that Dalton had disabled the bank cameras with infrared light. This makes it difficult for them to investigate the robbery further. The assailants free yet another hostage from the bank. His hands are tied behind his back, and a case is strapped to his chest. When the hostage is freed, he introduces himself as Vikram Voila, a bank employee. White pays a visit to the mayor in Manhattan and informs him that she is heading down to the hostage situation. She relies on him to ensure that she is treated with respect by those in authority. White clearly has enough clout to persuade the mayor to do what she wants, though this is not revealed. What kind of next? Fraser opens the case that was hung around Vikram's neck. It is empty, but there is a written demand from the robbers. They desire 2 buses as well as a fully fueled and manned plane. Every hour, a hostage will be executed in front of TV cameras if their demands are not met. However, Fraser claims that the perps will not even get a cup of coffee until he speaks with them. Meanwhile, Dalton walks outside and hands one of the cops a piece of paper instructing the cops to deliver enough food to feed all of the hostages. An officer in the command center suggests sending in pizzas because the boxes can conceal hidden transmitters, allowing them to pick up more hostage conversations. Inside the bank, Peltz, one of the hostages, becomes frustrated and removes his mask, arguing with his fellow hostages about his loss of control. Sadly, Dalton storms in, grabs his ankle, drags him to the storeroom, and punches him out. The following pizzas with hidden transmitters are delivered to Dalton via the transmitters. Personnel in the command center hear a foreign language spoken inside the bank. Stevie hands Steve her gun, takes off her gloves and sunglasses, and puts on an eye mask similar to the ones the hostages are forced to wear. She then begins acting as if she is crying hysterically in front of the hostages. Her plan is to disguise herself as one of the hostages. Steve pushes her into a room and forces her to sit. He then seizes another female hostage of similar height. Following this, he takes Stevie, whom he treats rudely, into another room while ensuring that all hostages are wearing masks and keeping their hands on the ground. Stevie is seen working in the storeroom in the following scene, but she resembles the female hostage from earlier. Officers in the mobile command center are reviewing the recordings made by the bugged pizza boxes. When they discover that the audio in a foreign language played over the transmitters is that of Enver Hoxha, they quickly realize that the robbers are outplaying them. The former president of Albania, who has been dead for 20 years, has returned to the bank. When Stevie and Dalton enter the bank's safety deposit box room, they carefully unlock a box and retrieve an envelope bearing the name Arthur Case and containing a number of legal documents. A large number of black velvet pouches and a red jewelry box are hidden beneath the envelope. Meanwhile, White arrives with the mayor and calls a meeting with Fraser. She wishes to communicate with the robbers inside. Fraser is initially skeptical but eventually agrees. He then finally makes phone contact with Dalton. The robbery leader assumes command, warning Fraser that the many innocent lives at stake require him to meet Dalton's previous demands. The film after the robbery, Fraser and Mitchell are interviewing another hostage, but this time the hostage is clearly Steve, even though the detectives are unaware that Steve gave his name as Kenneth Demersion inside one of the bank's rooms. A number of hostages are passing the time by conversing, and one of them, Hayam, mentions that he is a criminal law professor at Columbia, teaching courses on genocide, slave labor, and war reparation. He's also a former lawyer. Fraser then meets with White outside the command center and contacts Dalton inside the bank so that White can speak directly to him. White tells Dalton that if she is allowed to protect certain interests, she can help him get what he came for. Dalton tells her that she can come into the bank and talk to him face to face after she assures him that she is not a bank employee or a police officer. Fraser and 2 other officers then accompany White to the bank's doors. Once inside the bank, White makes her proposal to the robbery leader. If Dalton surrenders now, she can ensure that he will receive no more than the minimum prison sentence and that, when it is completed, he will have $2 million waiting for him to pick up from a secure location. Dalton, surprisingly, declines and then asks White to tell him about his interests. He then tells her a story about an American man who worked as a clerk in a Swiss bank during World War II. He used his Nazi position to enrich himself while people all around him were being robbed of everything at gunpoint. They owned him and then used his blood money to open a bank in New York, just like the man Dalton describes. Dalton then shows her the legal paperwork. He's taken the box she was in, declaring that it now belongs to him. Dalton intends to use them as leverage. If he is ever apprehended and tried for the robbery, White and her employer will have to use all of their resources to get him back outside the bank. Fraser informs White about his conversation with Dalton. White believes Dalton will not murder anyone, but Fraser is skeptical. More post-robbery interrogations follow, in which it is revealed that Peltz, the hostage who pulled off his mask and was punched out by Dalton, is Steve-O, demonstrating that all three Stevens acted up at some point while posing as hostages, all part of the act so that all three Stevens would appear as fellow hostages. Fraser and Mitchell are also seen interviewing Stevie, but she does not break, and the detectives are unable to distinguish her from the other hostages. At the moment, Fraser believes Dalton is holding them up. He then calls and bluffs him, saying that the requested plane is ready, but Fraser needs to come into the bank and ensure that none of the hostages have been killed. Dalton follows suit. Fraser is led into the bank by Dalton, who leads him through a series of connected offices where the hostages sit masked and dressed similarly to Dalton and the other robbers. Fraser offers Dalton a handshake near the exit door, which turns out to be a ruse to get Dalton to drop his guard just long enough for Fraser to grab him and wrestle him to the ground. Unfortunately for Steve-O, his rifle is lodged in Fraser's back. They force him out of the bank, where he meets Mitchell. Fraser enters the command center and briefs Darius, but just then, Dalton and his men kill a hostage as Fraser and the other agents watch the footage shaken to the core. Next, Coughlin and Darius study the blueprints of the bank while other cops prepare to storm it and end the situation. To avoid hostage casualties, they decide to use rubber bullets. The next morning, however, Fraser realizes that the metal case sent out with Vikram was tainted with a transmission device. Dalton had bugged them first, so he was aware of the planned bank storm, which had been planned for several hours. He grabbed a microphone. Fraser desperately warns Darius about the transmitter, but Darius refuses to listen. He declares that he is about to storm the bank. Within the bank, Dalton warns the three Stevens to lay smoke grenades as the hostages are led into the corridor. The police are about to launch their assault on the bank when the door is blown open by a small explosive. People dressed as painters start running out, pleading with the cops not to shoot. Despite this, some officers opened fire with rubber bullets until Captain Darius ordered that everyone be herded together and forced to lie down on the ground. They are placed in handcuffs, and their masks are removed. The ESU officers and detectives then led the way into the bank, quickly sweeping it room by room. They begin to uncover evidence that, as Fraser suspected, this was no ordinary robbery in which no bank money was taken. The rifles that the three Stevens left behind so that they could run out with the hostages and be indistinguishable from them are not real. They are toys in the ladies' restroom. They discover the white sack used to cover the murdered hostage's head with a hidden injector tube of red dye, proving that the earlier hostage execution was staged and no one was harmed. Meanwhile, all the hostages are brought to the station to be questioned by officers. Before putting the hostages on the buses, take their names and photograph them. Stevie's real name is Valerie Keepsake, and the Hasidic attorney Professor Hostage's name is Chain. Later, Fraser and Coughlin meet in a conference room, and the former tells the Grimm how meticulously and flawlessly planned the entire affair was. Each hostage was shown photographs and questioned about anyone who stood out in any way, but every single hostage has at least a few people who would suspect them. As Fraser gets up to leave, Coughlin tells him to bury the case. Coughlin mentions the missing money as an afterthought. Fraser was accused of embezzling, but he was found not guilty. Fraser is taken aback, and not entirely in a good way. Frazier returns to his office and discovers that safety box 392 is not on the recorded lists. It's the same box from which Dalton and his team retrieved the case documents. Grabbing his jacket, he invites Mitchell to accompany him. Frazier then goes to the courthouse, where he is greeted by Madeline White. She confronts him after being instructed to bury the case, reminding him of their agreement. The deal turns out to be promoting Frazier to a higher detective grade if he agrees to bury the case, but Frazier shows his trump card, a simple writing pen with a hidden recording device. Frazier plays back a recording from the time he was in the SUV with White and the mayor, when he had the pen in his suit coat pocket. The recording shows the mayor ordering Frazier to give White everything she needed in the robbery or his career would be over. Frazier tries to press charges on Arthur's case, regardless of whether he was guilty of drug money embezzlement or not. He is aware that the case is concealing something, and White begs Frazier to leave everything alone, but he departs without responding. In the following scene, White marches boldly into an exclusive men's club to confront Case about the fact that the robbers were after more than just the documents hidden in Case's safety box, which contained evidence of his crimes. She knows he must have had genuine precious valuables, and the only thing she can think of is that they were what the Nazis used to pay Case diamonds, and as Case adds, there was a Cartier ring of incalculable value that belonged to a wealthy Parisian Jewish banker and his family. The Case could have easily saved their lives, but the Nazis gave him the ring in exchange for selling them out. Case then writes a check to White as payment for her services before departing. The film returns to Dalton, who is in his cell holding one of the black velvet pouches and inspecting the diamonds inside it. He gathers a few possessions. He has 2 small lights on in his cell. He pulls down a wall in his cell, revealing that he was never in prison but was hiding behind a false wall he and his associates had built in the bank supply room with enough provisions to wait it out until all the news about the robbery had died down. He then carefully enters the public area of the bank across the street. Kenneth, Valerie, and Darius are waiting for them in an SUV the street. Chaim is also seen sitting with them. It turns out that he was also a part of the plan all along. The brains behind it, they see Frazier and Mitchell entering the bank and quickly call Dalton on his cell phone to warn him, but Dalton is unconcerned. He even goes so far as to run into Frazier as he and Mitchell walk into the bank. He then walks quietly out of the bank and into the waiting van, where he is greeted by Valerie's kiss and handshakes from Kenneth, Darius, and Chaim. When Chaim notices Dalton is missing the ring, Dalton says he left it in the safe deposit box but assures Chaim that it is in very good hands inside the bank. Frazier and Mitchell examine safety deposit box number 392. They are surprised and amused to discover an unopened package of juicy fruit gum, as well as a jewelry box containing an exquisite gold and diamond ring. There's also a scrap of paper with the words, "Follow the ring," scrawled on it. The detectives then go to see the case at his office. Frazier reveals what he discovered during the investigation to demonstrate that he knows Case hired Madeline White to keep Frazier in check and that Case is guilty of some serious crimes. He shows Case the ring and warns him that he will follow it. Frazier then goes to a high-end diner where the mayor is having lunch with Madeline White. He hands White the pen containing the incriminating recording he used as leverage against her. Frazier returns home in the evening and is greeted by Sylvia as he stores his gun and shield, as well as his acknowledgement plaque for his promotion to first grade. Because of White's power, he notices a small object reaching inside his suit coat pocket. He's taken aback to discover a small but exquisitely cut diamond. He laughs to himself as he realizes Dalton was the man who bumped into him at the bank entrance. Furthermore, as a mark of respect, he gave the diamond to Frazier, allowing the detective to get a proper engagement ring made and propose to Sylvia.